I always thought our marriage was solid, unshakable, even. Jenna and I had been together for 11 years, married for 8, and while life wasn't perfect, it was comfortable. We had the kind of life I'd always dreamed of, a cozy house in the suburbs, 2 kids, and a dog who barked at the mailman like clockwork every afternoon. If you had asked me a month ago, I would have said we were happy. Looking back, the cracks were there, small and almost invisible. Jenna had always been outgoing, the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking into it. She thrived on socializing, while I was more of a homebody. We balanced each other out, or so I thought. But over the last few months, she seemed different. It started with the little things. She began spending more time on her appearance, even on days when she didn't have anywhere special to go. She started texting more, her phone always within arm's reach. And then there were the late nights. Just dinner with the girls, she'd say, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear, her smile too quick, too rehearsed. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Jenna had just started a new job at a marketing firm, and I figured she was trying to make a good impression. It's probably nothing, I told myself. Don't be paranoid. The first time I truly felt something was off, it was a Tuesday night. I'd put the kids to bed, read them their favorite bedtime story, and then come downstairs to find Jenna sitting on the couch, her phone in her lap. She was smiling, the kind of soft, secret smile that wasn't meant for me. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She looked up, startled. "What?" "On your phone," I said, nodding toward the device. "You look pretty happy." "Oh, it's just Sarah," she said, holding up the phone to show me the screen. Sure enough, there was a message from Sarah, one of her oldest friends. But something about the way she answered felt off. "Okay," I said, forcing a smile. "You've just been glued to that thing lately." She laughed, brushing it off. "It's work, mostly. You know how it is." And for a while, I let that explanation be enough. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. After all, what kind of husband starts doubting his wife over a text? But as the weeks went on, the small cracks in our marriage began to grow. Jenna's excuses became more frequent, her answers more evasive. She started working late more often, her meetings conveniently scheduled during family dinners or the kids' bedtime. "Can't it wait until tomorrow?" I asked one night as she gathered her things to leave the house. "It's a client thing," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I can't reschedule." "But it's the 3rd time this week," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "I know," she said, sighing. "But this job is important, Chris. I'm doing this for us." "For us," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "It doesn't feel that way." She hesitated, her hand on the door. For a moment, I thought she might stay, might tell me what was really going on. But then she shook her head, forcing a smile. "I'll be back late. Don't wait up." And with that, she was gone. The next morning, Jenna acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work, her usual perfume lingering in the air. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Her words from the night before echoed in my mind. "I'm doing this for us." If that was true, why did it feel like she was slipping further away? I decided to brush it off. People go through phases, I told myself. Maybe Jenna really was overwhelmed with work. But that logic didn't stop the questions from creeping in at the edges of my thoughts. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, I tried to reconnect. The kids were chattering about their day, Ben, our 8-year-old, excitedly describing his soccer practice, while Katie, only 5, showed off a picture she had drawn in school. Jenna smiled at their stories, but it felt distant, like her mind was somewhere else. "Everything okay?" I asked her when the kids had gone to play in the other room. She looked up from her plate, startled. "What do you mean?" You've been a little distracted lately, I said carefully. I just want to make sure you're okay. Her smile faltered, but only for a second. I'm fine, she said quickly. Work has just been crazy. You know how it is. I nodded, even though I didn't know how it was. My job as an accountant was predictable, steady. I didn't bring work home, and I certainly didn't let it take over my life. But Jenna's job was different, fast-paced, demanding. Maybe she really was just stressed. Still, the way she avoided my gaze made my stomach twist. The next Friday, Jenna mentioned she was meeting her friends for dinner. It wasn't unusual for her to have girls' nights every now and then, and I encouraged her to take time for herself. But this time, something felt different. What time will you be back? I asked as she grabbed her purse. Not too late, she said. Don't wait up. I watched her go, a knot forming in my chest. Normally, she'd at least give me an idea of where she was going or who she was meeting. But tonight, there were no details, just a vague excuse. After the kids were in bed, I sat on the couch, trying to focus on the game on TV. But my mind kept drifting back to Jenna. What if she wasn't with her friends? What if there was more to her late nights and evasive answers than just work stress? The real turning point came the following week. Jenna left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs getting ready. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. But as I passed by, the screen lit up with a notification. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. My heart stopped. The message wasn't from a name I recognized, just an initial, A. My first instinct was to pick up the phone, to scroll through her messages and find out who A was. But then guilt washed over me. Was I really about to snoop through my wife's phone? I stood there for what felt like an eternity, torn between my growing suspicion and my desperate need to trust her. In the end, I walked away, leaving the phone untouched. But the message burned in my mind, a question I couldn't ignore. That night, as Jenna lay beside me, her breathing slow and steady in sleep, I stared at the ceiling. Who was A? Was it a friend? A coworker? Or was it something more? I wanted to ask her, to confront her with the evidence and demand an explanation. But part of me was terrified of what I might hear. What if my worst fears were true? What if the woman I loved was hiding something I couldn't forgive? For the first time in our marriage, I felt like I didn't know Jenna at all. The next morning, I couldn't shake the message from my mind. The words, "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing," echoed in my thoughts like a taunt. Every glance Jenna threw my way felt calculated, every word she spoke felt like a potential lie. My stomach churned as I considered my options. I could confront her, but what if I was wrong? What if I was reading too much into something innocent? Or worse, what if I wasn't? Jenna left for work earlier than usual that morning, her goodbyes rushed and distant. I watched her drive away, the knot in my stomach tightening. Something was off, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The message, her late nights, the way she had started guarding her phone, it all pointed to one conclusion, but I wasn't ready to accept it. That day, while I worked from home, I started noticing other small details. Jenna's credit card statement, sitting on the kitchen counter, showed charges for restaurants I didn't recognize. The dates aligned with her girls' nights and late meetings. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but doubt gnawed at me like a parasite. That evening, as I put the kids to bed, my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, one of Jenna's oldest friends. "Hey, Chris. Is everything okay with Jenna? She's been different lately. I'm worried about her." I stared at the message, my heart racing. Sarah was one of the few people I trusted implicitly. If she had noticed something, it meant I wasn't imagining things. Different how? I typed back. There was a long pause before her reply came through. She's been pulling away. Canceling plans, not answering calls. I thought maybe work was stressing her out, but, I don't know. She hasn't been herself. I thanked Sarah for reaching out, but her words only added fuel to the fire. If Jenna wasn't confiding in her best friend, then who was she confiding in? That night, after Jenna came home from work, I decided to test the waters. She looked tired as she set her bag down and kicked off her heels, her usual routine. I waited until we were in the kitchen, away from the kids, before speaking. "How was your day?" I asked casually, watching her closely. She shrugged. "Busy. Meetings all day." "Did you see Sarah recently?" I asked, throwing out the name intentionally. Her eyes flickered with something, surprise, guilt, before she quickly recovered. "No, why?" "She texted me," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Said she was worried about you." Jenna's expression hardened. "Why would she text you?" "I'm fine." "She thinks you've been distant," I pressed. "And honestly, I've noticed it too." Jenna's face flushed, her lips tightening. "Work has been overwhelming, Chris. I don't have time to socialize like I used to." "That's not what I mean," I said, my voice firm. "You've been distant with me. You're always on your phone, always out late. I feel like I barely know what's going on in your life anymore." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I told you, it's just work. Why are you making this into something it's not?" "Because it feels like there's more to it," I said, my voice rising. "And I need to know the truth, Jenna." Her eyes narrowed, her defensive walls snapping into place. "I don't know what you're accusing me of, but you need to stop. I'm doing the best I can to keep this family afloat, and all you're doing is making it harder." The conversation ended there, the tension between us thicker than ever. Jenna stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the empty room and wondering if I had just made everything worse. The following day, after Jenna left for work, I found myself drawn to her phone again. It was sitting on the counter, face down as usual. My hands shook as I picked it up, hesitating for a moment before unlocking it. I knew her passcode. It was our wedding anniversary, a detail that now felt bitterly ironic. My heart raced as I scrolled through her messages, looking for any sign of A. Most of the conversation seemed mundane, chats with coworkers, reminders about school events for the kids, but then I found it. A text thread with a contact saved as A. I opened it, my chest tightening as I read the messages. "Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again. I miss you already. Are we still on for Friday? I'll book the usual spot." The messages were dated over the past few weeks, aligning perfectly with the nights Jenna had claimed to be working late or out with friends. My vision blurred as I stared at the screen, the truth staring back at me in black and white. She was cheating on me. The messages in Jenna's phone were damning, every word a dagger that twisted deeper into my chest. I read through them again, each one stripping away the denial I had been clinging to. She wasn't just lying to me, she was building an entirely separate life with this A. I placed the phone back on the counter, my hands trembling. I couldn't let her know I'd seen the messages, not yet. If I confronted her now, she'd deny everything, spin some story about how it wasn't what it looked like. I needed to be sure. I needed proof. That evening, I couldn't bring myself to look at Jenna the same way. When she walked through the door, her usual smile plastered on her face, I felt my stomach churn. She kissed me on the cheek, the gesture hollow. "How were the kids?" she asked, setting her bag down. "They're good," I said shortly. I didn't trust myself to say much more. She tilted her head, studying me. "You okay? You seem off." "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." She seemed to accept the answer, brushing it off as she headed upstairs. I followed her with my eyes, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? Who was A? And where did they meet when she left the house under the guise of work? The next day, while Jenna was at work, I decided to dig deeper. Her laptop was on the desk in our shared home office, and I knew she rarely bothered to log out of her accounts. My pulse quickened as I opened it, feeling a mix of guilt and determination. Sure enough, her email was open. I scrolled through the inbox, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. Most of it was work-related, but then I saw a message from a Gmail address with no name attached. The subject line read, "Tonight, same time." My stomach dropped as I clicked on it. "Can't wait to see you. I'll bring the wine. Let me know if you're free to stay longer this time." The message was signed, simply, A. I leaned back in the chair, my heart pounding in my chest. The evidence was piling up, each piece confirming what I didn't want to believe. This wasn't just an affair, it was premeditated, deliberate. She had lied to me, to our kids, to everyone. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I waited, watching her every move. When she said she had to work late again, I nodded, pretending to believe her. "Be safe," I said as she kissed me goodbye. Once she was gone, I called Sarah. I needed an ally, someone who knew Jenna as well as I did, someone who might be able to help me make sense of this. "Chris," Sarah said when she answered. "What's going on?" "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice strained. "When's the last time you saw Jenna?" There was a pause on the other end. "A few weeks ago, I think." "Why?" "She's been different," I said carefully. "And I think she might be lying about where she's going." "Chris," Sarah said cautiously, "what are you trying to say?" "I think she's seeing someone else," I admitted, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I found messages." Sarah inhaled sharply. "Oh my God. Are you sure?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I'm sure." "I don't even know what to say," Sarah said after a moment. "I'm so sorry, Chris. You don't deserve this." "Thanks," I said quietly. "I just needed to tell someone." The next time Jenna said she was working late, I decided to follow her. I waited until she left the house, then grabbed my keys and slipped into my car. She was a creature of habit, so I wasn't surprised when she took the same route she always did. But instead of heading to her office, she turned down a quiet side street and pulled into the parking lot of a boutique hotel. My stomach churned as I parked a few spots away, watching her get out of the car. She was dressed up, her hair styled and her makeup flawless. She glanced around nervously before walking inside. I waited for a few minutes, my mind racing. Then, as calmly as I could, I followed her into the lobby. She was nowhere to be seen, but the clerk at the front desk barely looked up as I walked past. I scanned the elevators, the hallways, searching for any sign of her. When I finally spotted her, she was standing outside her room at the end of the hall. She knocked once, the door opening a moment later to reveal a man I didn't recognize. He smiled as he pulled her inside, the door clicking shut behind them. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to storm down the hall, to pound on the door and demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked away, my hands trembling as I clenched them into fists. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jenna and the man at the hotel, the way she had smiled at him, the way he had welcomed her inside. My chest felt tight, my thoughts spiraling as I tried to process what I had seen. By morning, I knew I couldn't keep silent any longer. This wasn't something I could ignore or brush aside. Jenna needed to know that I knew. That morning, I went about my usual routine as if nothing had changed. I made pancakes for the kids, poured my coffee, and watched as Jenna breezed into the kitchen, her hair still damp from her shower. "Morning," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "Smells good." "Morning," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Inside, I was anything but calm. We ate breakfast as a family, the kids chattering about their weekend plans. Jenna laughed and joked with them, her demeanor so natural that, for a moment, I almost doubted myself. But then I remembered the messages, the hotel, the man. Once the kids ran off to play, I turned to Jenna. We need to talk. Her smile faltered, her fork hovering midair. Okay, she said cautiously. What's going on? Not here, I said, standing. Let's go into the office. As soon as the door to the office closed behind us, I turned to face her. How long have you been seeing him? I asked bluntly. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. What are you talking about? Don't, I said sharply. Don't play dumb, Jenna. I followed you last night. I saw you at the hotel. I saw him. She froze, her face paling. For a moment, she didn't say anything, and I almost thought she might deny it. But then her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. I didn't want you to find out this way, she said softly. I stared at her, the anger bubbling beneath my skin. You didn't want me to find out at all, I said bitterly. How long, Jenna? How long have you been lying to me? A few months, she admitted, her voice trembling. It started as a work thing, meetings, late nights, but it got out of hand. Out of hand? I repeated, my voice rising. You cheated on me, Jenna. You betrayed me. That's not out of hand. That's a choice. Tears filled her eyes, spilling over as she covered her face with her hands. I'm so sorry, Chris, she sobbed. I never meant for this to happen. Never meant for it to happen. I snapped. You're kidding yourself if you think I'm buying that. You knew exactly what you were doing. Every time you lied to me, every time you walked out that door, you made a choice. The conversation spiraled from there, emotions running high as the full extent of Jenna's betrayal came to light. She tried to explain, to justify her actions, but nothing she said made the pain any easier to bear. You weren't here, she said at one point, her voice breaking. You were always so busy with work, with the kids. I felt invisible. Invisible? I repeated, shaking my head. That's the best excuse you can come up with. I've been here, Jenna. I've been here every day, holding this family together while you, I stopped, my voice cracking. While you threw it all away. She sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking as she crumpled into a chair. I love you, she whispered. I never stopped loving you. Love? I said bitterly. If this is love, then I don't want it. Later that day, as Jenna stayed holed up in the bedroom, I sat the kids down to talk. I couldn't bring myself to tell them everything, but they deserved to know that something was happening. Mommy and I are having some problems, I said carefully, keeping my voice calm. We both love you very much, but things might be a little different for a while. Ben looked at me with wide, confused eyes. Are you and Mommy mad at each other? No, buddy, I lied. We're just working through some things. Katie crawled into my lap, her small arms wrapping around my neck. Are you leaving? She asked, her voice trembling. I kissed the top of her head, holding her close. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. I'll always be here for you. That night, as I lay awake in the guest room, my mind raced with possibilities. Should I leave? Should I give Jenna a chance to make things right? Every option felt impossible, each one filled with its own brand of pain. I knew one thing for sure, whatever decision I made, it would change everything. The morning light filtered through the blinds of the guest room as I lay awake, my thoughts spiraling in 1,000 directions. Jenna's sobbing had quieted sometime in the night, but the echoes of our confrontation still rang in my ears. How had it come to this? How had the woman I built a life with turned into someone I could barely recognize? That day, I called Jason, my oldest friend. He'd been my rock through thick and thin, and I needed his perspective more than ever. "What's going on, man?" he asked when I arrived at his house. Jason had always been blunt, and I appreciated that about him. "Jenna's been cheating," I said flatly, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Jason's eyes widened. "Damn. I'm sorry, Chris. Are you okay?" "I don't even know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to pack my bags and leave. But then I think about the kids. They deserve a family." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, but you can't stay just for the kids. You'll end up miserable, and that'll hurt them more in the long run." "I know," I said, running a hand through my hair. I need time to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do." Jason clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Whatever you decide, I've got your back." When I got home that evening, Jenna was sitting at the dining table, her eyes red from crying. She looked up as I walked in, her face filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Chris," she said softly. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I think we need to." She gestured for me to sit, and for a moment, we were silent. Finally, she spoke. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't undo," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just please don't give up on us." I stared at her, my emotions warring inside me. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hope that we could rebuild what we'd lost. But another part, the part that remembered the messages, the hotel, the lies, wasn't sure if that was possible. "This isn't just about me," I said finally. "It's about the kids. They deserve stability. They deserve parents who respect each other." Jenna nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. And I'll do everything I can to earn back your respect." A week later, we attended our first counseling session. Dr. Harper, a calm and empathetic therapist, greeted us warmly and invited us to sit. "Let's start with why you're here," Dr. Harper said, her voice gentle. "Jenna, would you like to begin?" Jenna hesitated, then nodded. "I made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "I cheated on Chris. And I don't know if he'll ever forgive me, but I'm here because I want to try." Dr. Harper turned to me. "And how do you feel about that, Chris?" "Angry," I said bluntly. "Hurt. Betrayed. I don't know if I can ever trust her again." "That's completely valid," Dr. Harper said. "Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and when it's broken, it takes time to rebuild. The question is, are you both willing to put in the effort?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm here because I owe it to my kids to try." The sessions were grueling, forcing us to confront the pain we had both buried. Jenna shared her reasons for the affair, her feelings of loneliness, her resentment over how we had grown distant. Hearing her perspective was painful, but it also forced me to examine my own role in our struggles. "You're allowed to be angry," Dr. Harper said during one session. "But anger alone won't help you heal. Whether you decide to stay or leave, you need to find a way to let go of the bitterness." Letting go felt impossible, but I knew she was right. I couldn't move forward if I stayed shackled to the past. One evening, after another exhausting counseling session, I came home to find the kids building a fort in the living room. Their laughter echoed through the house, filling the space with a warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. "Daddy, come help," Ben called, waving me over. For the next hour, I let myself forget about the pain, immersing myself in their world. As we worked together, Jenna joined us, her smile hesitant but genuine. For a moment, it felt like we were a family again. The days stretched into weeks, and the counseling sessions began to chip away at the walls Jenna and I had built between us. But even as we worked through our issues, the doubts lingered. Could I truly forgive her? Would I ever be able to trust her again? One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Jenna and I sat on the porch, the cool night air swirling around us. She sipped her tea, her hands trembling slightly. "Chris," she began, her voice hesitant, "I know this has been hell for you. And I don't blame you for feeling the way you do. But I need to ask, do you think we have a chance?" I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so long, and felt the weight of her question settle heavily on my chest. "I don't know," I admitted. "Some days, I think maybe we can get through this. Other days, I don't even know who you are anymore." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she nodded. "I understand. I just want you to know that no matter what you decide, I'll keep fighting for us. For the kids. For everything we've built." Her words were earnest, but they didn't ease the turmoil inside me. I nodded, staring out at the darkened yard, unsure of what the future held. "Jason convinced me to take a weekend away, just the two of us. You need a break," he said. "A little space to clear your head." We drove to a cabin in the woods, far from the chaos of my life at home. The first night, we sat by the fire, beers in hand, as Jason tried to lighten the mood. "So," he said, "you think you'll stay? Or are you ready to call it quits?" I sighed, staring into the flames. "I don't know, man. I love her, but how do you come back from something like this?" Jason nodded, his expression serious. "Trust takes time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. The question is, do you think it's worth the effort?" "I don't know," I said again, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "I just want to do what's best for the kids." "They'll be okay, no matter what," Jason said. "They've got you. That's what matters." When I returned home, I found Jenna in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red from crying. "I found this while cleaning out the closet," she said softly. "Do you remember this day?" She handed me the album, open to a picture of the two of us on our wedding day. We were laughing, arms wrapped around each other, radiating pure joy. My chest tightened as I looked at the photo, remembering how certain I had been that we'd spend the rest of our lives together. "I remember," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Jenna nodded, her tears falling freely now. "I was so happy that day. And I threw it all away. I don't deserve another chance, but I want you to know that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right." That weekend, we took the kids to the park. It was a simple outing, but it felt significant, a step toward normalcy. As the kids ran around, laughing and chasing each other, Jenna and I sat on a bench, watching them. "They're happy," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "Despite everything, they're happy." "They're resilient," I said, my gaze fixed on Ben as he helped Katie climb the jungle gym. "More than I am, apparently." She smiled faintly, her hand brushing against mine. "Chris, I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back. But I hope you know that I'll never stop trying to fix this." I didn't pull my hand away, but I didn't respond either. My heart was still torn, caught between the love we had shared and the pain of her betrayal. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the events of the past weeks in my mind. The counseling sessions, the conversations, the moments of hope, they were all pieces of a puzzle I was still struggling to put together. I knew I had to make a decision. Staying meant putting in the work to rebuild our marriage, knowing it might never be the same. Leaving meant starting over, leaving behind the life we had built together. Neither option felt easy. But I couldn't stay in limbo forever. The house was quiet as I sat in the living room, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Jenna had gone to bed hours ago, and the kids were fast asleep. I stared at the photo album on the coffee table, the image of our wedding day still open. It felt like a lifetime ago, a time when the thought of betrayal would have been unimaginable. But life had a way of changing everything. The next morning, I found Jenna in the kitchen, sipping her coffee. She looked up as I walked in, her expression wary. "Good morning," she said softly. Morning, I replied, grabbing my own cup. I hesitated for a moment before sitting across from her. We need to talk. She set her mug down, her hands clasping tightly around it. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. This hasn't been easy for me, I began. What you did, it broke something in me, Jenna. Something I'm not sure can ever fully heal. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't interrupt. That said, I continued, I've seen how hard you're trying. The counseling, the way you've been with the kids, how open you've been with me. I see it. And I want to believe that you're serious about making things right. I am, she said quickly, her voice trembling. Chris, I swear, I'll do whatever it takes. I know, I said, nodding. But this isn't just about you. It's about me, too. I need to decide if I can move past this, if I can trust you again. Jenna wiped at her eyes, her breath hitching. And, have you decided? I've decided to try, I said finally. Her head snapped up, her expression a mix of shock and relief. But this isn't going to be easy. It's going to take time, and it's going to take work. And if I feel like it's not working, I won't hesitate to walk away. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Thank you for giving me this chance. I won't let you down, Chris. I promise. I nodded, my emotions still tangled, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of clarity. I wasn't ready to forgive her, not yet, but I was willing to see if we could rebuild what we had lost. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Counseling sessions became less about rehashing the past and more about building a future. We learned how to communicate better, how to navigate our differences without letting resentment fester. It wasn't perfect, there were still moments of tension, still nights when I lay awake questioning my decision, but it was progress. Jenna continued to show her commitment. She shared her location when she went out, answered my questions without defensiveness, and took active steps to repair the damage she had caused. Slowly, cautiously, I began to trust her again. One Saturday, we decided to spend the day at the beach. The kids were thrilled, racing down to the water with their buckets and shovels. Jenna and I sat on a blanket, watching them play. They're so happy, she said, her smile soft. They are, I agreed, my gaze fixed on Ben as he helped Katie build a sandcastle. Jenna turned to me, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you for letting me be part of this. For giving us another chance. I looked at her, the woman who had hurt me more than anyone else ever could, and felt a flicker of hope. We're not there yet, I said honestly. But we're moving in the right direction. Months turned into a year, and while the scars of the past hadn't disappeared, they had begun to fade. Jenna and I were stronger, not perfect, but stronger. The betrayal had forced us to confront the cracks in our marriage, to rebuild from the ground up. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Jenna reached for my hand. I love you, she said, her voice steady. I love you too, I said, surprising myself with the realization that I meant it. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were walking it together.